Good afternoon, colleagues. We are welcome to the final session for workstream 1 for this particular session. And we have one item that we are going to look at. And that's the item Article 12 on capacity building and technical assistance. All right. So we basically drafted this article based on the discussions we had in Nairobi. And as part of what's in it, we look at what already exists in terms of capacity building, both technical support among member states and other technical institutions. And based on that, we had some initial document which we will discuss this afternoon. And what we currently have five paragraphs that looks at, as I said, I won't be reading it out. But then generally it talks about what we expect state parties to do and how we can best cooperate on it. And so with that, I believe we've had time to look through it. And we can come out with our suggestions and our comments on this particular article to enable us refine it and conclude some initial discussions on it, and then conclude sometime during the work streams in preparation for August. So we would welcome comments from member states to enable us go on. Unless member states are satisfied with what we have there, and they don't see the need for us to. Okay. Sweden, please.
Thank you so much, colleague, for giving me the floor, and happy Friday afternoon, colleagues. Sweden is glad to have had extensive capacity building within the taxation area, including peer-to-peer learning that has provided many lessons learned and shared experiences. And we believe that capacity building is an important part of international tax cooperation, and we support an article on this and technical assistance in the Framework Convention. An essential part of this, which also aligns with Sweden's support within the broader aspects of financing for development and the integrated national financing frameworks, is that capacity building is demand-based and that it aligns with the national priorities of partner countries. A lot of different capacity building measures are also carried out together with different regional and international organizations, so we fully agree that it's crucial that these projects are coordinated so that they are as efficient as possible. We also understand that access to information is important in this regard, and that this might be an area where capacity building project in many different forms could be helpful. So therefore, at this stage, we are hesitant to include formulation that limit what would otherwise be a flexible approach to the potential targeted areas. Some examples could, of course, be mentioned in this article, but we need to be able to have a dialogue on the needs and specify these later on. So in detail, we are of the view that paragraph 1 would be better placed somewhere else in this framework convention rather than as a standalone paragraph under this article. In this context, we would also suggest adding language on evaluation of the results achieved with targeted capacity building so that we can measure the effects in a long-term and sustainable way. And lastly, we would also appreciate some further background and explanation on how paragraphs 4 and 5 should be interpreted in this article. Thank you.
Thank you, Sweden. Belgium, please.
Thank you, Khalid, for giving me the floor. Belgium, just like Sweden, recognizes the important role of capacity building and technical assistance for developing countries, and we support this by providing expertise for enrollment of programs of international organizations, amongst which UNDP's Tax Inspectors Without Borders, and through our own bilateral work with partner countries. We are also currently strengthening cooperation to meet the growing demands for tax-related support. As we're well aware, the needs are high and we need to step up our efforts. Now on the article, we see this article as a good overall basis for enhancing capacity building in domestic revenue mobilization as an important contribution to sustainable development goals. Paragraphs 1 and 2 rightly address both the support required for the implementation of commitments under this framework convention and its future protocols, and the strengthening of tax policy capacity needed to ensure a genuine level playing field for inclusive decision-making. Paragraph 3 correctly highlights the need for coordination to one hand avoid duplication, and on the other hand address needs that remain unmet. However, the reference to specific topics in paragraphs B and C seems a bit out of place in this article on capacity building. We believe capacity building and technical assistance has to be demand-driven, and this is best served by keeping the scope as broad as possible. By highlighting certain topics and therefore not highlighting others, it looks like we're prioritizing some topics over others. It's in our view up to the state parties to decide which areas they want to strengthen and what their specific pressing needs are. The Sevilla Declaration requests countries to double the capacity building support given to developing countries, aiming for developing countries to increase their tax to GDP ratios to at least 15%. Given the diversity of developing countries, the areas that need to be strengthened in order to get to this 15% tax per GDP ratio will also be very diverse and will depend on the concrete circumstances of each developing countries. Belgium would therefore ask to remove paragraphs B and C in order to keep the scope for assistance as broad as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. Russian Federation, please.
Большое спасибо, господин сопредседатель, за предоставленное слово. Мы высоко ценим усилия и благодарны за разработку 12-й статьи по такой важной теме, как наращивание потенциала и техническая помощь. Статья подчеркивает важность обеспечения возможности для всех стран вносить значимый вклад в процессе выработки норм и поддерживать их. Однако представляется, что сфера наращивания потенциала не должна ограничиться исключительно вопросами налоговой политики, как это указано в пункте 2. Не менее важно учитывать потребности, связанные с налоговым администрированием, включая операционные, процедурные и институциональные аспекты и потребности. Ограничивать фокус только на налоговую политику будет недостаточным для преодоления существующих разрывов в имплементации правил, особенно для развивающихся стран. Поэтому мы предлагаем, чтобы статья явным образом адресовала еще вопросы налогового администрирования, повышения эффективности налогового администрирования. Также небольшой комментарий про пункт 1 статьи. Пункт 1 носит обязывающий характер и представляется, как будто бы является избыточным этот обязывающий характер, так как не вполне понятно, какого рода обязательства возлагаются на страны, в первую очередь учитывая добровольный характер программ технического содействия в принципе. У меня все. Спасибо.
Okay, thank you, Russia. Norway, please.
Thank you, Mr. Khalid. Capacity building is essential to ensure that all countries, and especially developing countries, can effectively administer and enforce domestic and international tax laws and policies. By building tax capacity strengthens accountability and enables countries to mobilize resources and participate in international cooperation on an equal footing. Norway is happy to say that we have provided long-standing support for capacity building projects in the tax administration. And we plan on continuing and increasing this support in the years to come in line with the commitments in the Compromiso de Sevilla. We would like to echo Sweden's comments that it is an important part of international tax cooperation, and we therefore believe that capacity building has a place in this convention. More specifically, though, we believe that paragraph 1 does not belong in this article, as it states more general principles, and I think this needs to be further discussed. Paragraph 2 raises important considerations, but we wonder whether this is more preamble language than a language that should be expressed in the commitment itself. We also had some questions about the last paragraph, which seems to go into the issue of relationship with other agreements, and perhaps this is also has less a home here because it goes into the discussions we will probably have later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Norway. China, please.
Thank you, co-lead. First, we agree that capacity building and technical assistance are essential for inclusive and effective international tax cooperation. China has consistently supported and has actively implemented concrete measures to assist developing countries in strengthening their tax administration capacities, and will continue to do so. Second, we think the first paragraph, which affirms the fundamental implementation obligation of all states parties, falls outside the specific thematic scope of this article, which is dedicated to capacity building. We therefore propose this content be relocated to a dedicated article on general obligation or implementation, or integrated into the preamble. Third, drawing reference from provisions on capacity building and technical assistance in other UN conventions, such as the UN Convention Against Corruption, we suggest that the article should clarify a coherent logic for capacity building. We think this can be structured along 3 pillars, not two pillars. First, I think it is the primary responsibility of states parties' efforts to strengthen their own capacities. And specific contents of capacity building should be clarified in this part. And second, the supports provided by developed and other countries in a position to do so to state parties in need. And third, a coordinating and facilitating role for the Conference of the Parties and the Secretariat. We think organizing the article in accordance with this structure can make the article clear, legitimate, balanced, and practical. We can provide a draft text for consideration later in the form of written comments. Thank you.
Thank you, China. Germany, please.
Thank you, Mr. Colleague. I wasn't expecting, but anyway. Gonna push my lunch aside. Well, thank you, Mr. Colleague. Capacity building and technical assistance are also, in our view, fundamental to ensuring that all jurisdictions can participate effectively and equitably in the international tax system. We take this commitment very seriously, having implemented a wide range of initiatives to date, and we remain fully determined to further expand these efforts in future. This statement made in paragraph 1 is also, in our view, very broad and general. It is relevant not only for the capacity building and technical assistance, which is to be addressed under that article, but it addresses the implementation of the entire convention. We believe that such general statements regarding obligations should instead be mentioned or addressed in a general provision. For example, this could be suitably placed under Article 25 alongside the provisions on reservations. We strongly support the emphasis in paragraph 2 on the need to take into account the different needs, priorities, and capacities of all countries to enable meaningful contributions to the norm-setting processes at all stages. Finally, we welcome that capacity building measures and the provision of technical assistance are to be carried out in a coordinated manner. We strongly encourage that. With that, I thank you, and thanks for your understanding.
Thank you, Germany. I think you can continue your lunch now. Zambia, please.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair. Speaking on behalf of the Africa Group, capacity building and technical assistance is one area we see to be very fundamental in enhancing domestic resource mobilization, and it's a key component in enhancing international tax cooperation, noting the various international instruments that are coming up and the new tax architecture that is coming up, and we believe that we welcome that is actually an article in the convention to address this aspect. We have looked at the text, and as others have indicated, we have some reservations on paragraph 1, but notwithstanding that, we have some text that we shall share. I won't read out the text, but some text that we shall share, like the way we've been sharing the text. The key issues that we believe should be covered, and some of them have been covered in the text as provided, obviously. We believe that capacity building should be as broad enough, not only on providing information, but we believe that secondments, peer learning, transfer and acquisition of knowledge, skills, technology are very fundamental. Strengthening international institutional arrangements is key. We believe that capacity building should be sustainable for countries that are receiving it, and therefore, when we look at the text, there are some elements we feel the text has not, that there are some elements we've seen that have not been covered, and therefore we've tried to elaborate that in a text that we shall share for all. But
excuse me, Zambia.
Yes.
In order for us to include the text in the responses we do, you need to present the text here. So you need to read it out, then you can forward it for posting. So you have to read out the text. Thank you.
Okay, Chair, with your guidance, I'll proceed accordingly. Members and fellow delegates shall indulge me. Those who are trying to write, probably you may miss me. It's quite a number of text that is before me, but I'll proceed as guided. So we have a number of paragraphs. I think we have 4 paragraphs, although the longest paragraph is 2. The proposed text for paragraph 1 reads, state parties commit to cooperate to strengthen their capacity in tax matters, taking into account the needs of developing countries and countries in special situations. Paragraph 2, such cooperation shall promote the transfer of technical, scientific, and legal expertise and technology to strengthen international tax cooperation and capacities of parties to effectively administer taxes, discharge their obligations or commitments arising from this convention, boost domestic resource mobilization, and drive accountability in the use of mobilized resources. The measures shall include, inter alia, A, establishment of institutional mechanisms to support member states, especially developing countries, in their efforts to build capacity on relevant international tax practice and related issues to ensure that they have adequate capacity to participate effectively in international tax cooperation and to implement the Framework Convention. B, facilitate the development, transfer, and acquisition of technology, knowledge, skills, capacity, and expertise related to international tax cooperation and tax administration including through peer learning, exchange programs, and secondments. C, promote and cooperate with relevant national, regional, or international organizations in the development, application, and transfer of technologies, skills, practices, and processes that boost efficiency in tax administration and to control, reduce, or prevent tax evasion, aggressive tax planning, and illicit financial flows. D, assist upon request in the development of a strong legislative foundation as well as technical programs, including those on prevention of harmful tax practices, unhealthy tax competition, aggressive tax planning, tax evasion, and illicit financial flows. E, assist as appropriate in the development of institutional framework for effective tax administration and to combat harmful tax practices, unhealthy tax competition, aggressive tax planning, tax evasion, and illicit financial flows. F, setting up data analytics and exchange of information frameworks, including the procurement and deployment of the requisite technology. G, the development and implementation of tax education and training programs, including the strengthening of national institutions on tax and the exchange or secondment of personnel to train experts in this field, in particular for developing countries. H, enhancement of financial and material assistance to support capacity building and technical assistance generally. I, where necessary, coordination of technical assistance or capacitation program for member states from various stakeholders in a manner that ensures efficient use of resources, avoids undue duplication of efforts, and boosts impact. I move to paragraph 3. To the extent possible, these measures shall be without prejudice to existing foreign assistance commitments or to other financial cooperation arrangements at the bilateral, regional, or international level. And the last paragraph, state parties may conclude bilateral or multilateral agreements or arrangements on material and logistical assistance, taking into consideration the financial arrangements necessary for the means of international cooperation provided by this convention to be effective. So this is our proposed text from the Africa Group, and like I indicated in my opening remarks, we're trying to ensure that it's as broad as possible, covering various areas and different forms of technical assistance and capacity building, and also to ensure that there is sustainability in terms of training experts and ensuring that secondments and peer learning are one of the means of ensuring that the technical assistance and capacity building is enhanced to achieve not only the objectives of the Framework Convention, but ultimately enhance international tax cooperation and domestic revenue mobilization. I submit, Chair, on behalf of the Africa Group.
Thank you, Zambia. Saudi Arabia, please.
Thank you, co-lead. We believe that capacity building and technical assistance is an essential part of the Framework Convention, and we believe that the article should prioritize practical, accessible tools and simplified implementation measures. As a general comment, we feel that the article would be practically useful and work for all jurisdictions if it gives general or broad provision to support countries with legal infrastructure under this convention, instead of detailed provision that may not achieve the needed benefits for building capacity and receiving technical assistance. More specifically, we would like to see clarification on paragraph 1. The intention of paragraph 1 is not clear to us. Our understanding is that if the convention is ratified, it would be sufficient enough to achieve the purpose or objective of this paragraph. So that's a point of clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia. Your question well noted. India, please.
Thank you, Chair. We recognize that capacity building is a vital element for achieving the objectives of the proposed Framework Convention. And in this regard, we agree with the intent reflected in the draft provisions of the article, including references to financial, technical, and material assistance, considering the various needs, priorities, and capacities of all countries. India has consistently been a front runner in its commitment to capacity building initiatives across various multilateral fora, including the United Nations, and strongly supports strengthened international cooperation in this area. At the same time, we believe that the provisions under this article could be summarized and streamlined to make them more concise and emphatic while retaining their substantive value. Also aligning with the comments made by Zambia, China, and Germany, we note that the language in paragraph 1 appears to be general in nature and reads more like an overarching enabling provision rather than one specifically focused on capacity building. While we fully acknowledge the importance of such enabling language and agree that it should be retained in the Framework Convention, but we suggest that it may be more appropriately placed or reframed outside this particular article. Accordingly, we propose that this article be modified to focus more directly on concrete capacity building commitments while preserving the broader enabling provisions elsewhere in the Convention. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India. Peru, please.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente, por brindarme la palabra. En el caso del Perú, agradecemos la oportunidad de abordar la importancia del desarrollo de capacidades y asistencia técnica en este convenio, sobre todo considerando la relevancia de este tema para hacer efectiva esta cooperación tributaria internacional. Dicho esto, apreciaría que puedan brindarnos mayor claridad sobre los compromisos que estarían asumiendo los Estados miembros al amparo de este artículo, sobre todo considerando las limitaciones presupuestarias que enfrentan los países en desarrollo. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Peru. Sierra Leone, please.
Thank you, Khalid. Thank you, Chair. Sierra Leone associates itself fully with the statement delivered by Zambia on behalf of the African Group on Article 12, Capacity Building and Technical Assistance. We consider Article 12 to be foundational to the Convention, as the effective implementation of all substantive obligations depend on the availability of adequate and sustainable capacity in developing and least developed countries. Without effective capacity building obligations elsewhere in the Convention, risks being inequitable in practice. Sierra Leone supports the African Group's position that capacity building and technical assistance must be integral, predictable, and treated as a shared responsibility of all state parties, rather than as voluntary or ad hoc supports. We emphasize that capacity building should be broad in scope, encompassing legal and regulatory frameworks, institutional strengthening, human resource development, and digital infrastructure for tax administration. Sierra Leone further supports the explicit prioritization of developing and least developed countries and stresses that assistance should be demand-driven, tailored to national circumstances, and aligned with domestic development strategies. We support a UN-coordinated approach to capacity building and technical assistance, including the promotion of South and regional cooperation to ensure inclusivity, coherence, and sustainability. Finally, Sierra Leone underscores that Article 12 underpins the effective implementation of other provisions of the Convention, including exchange of information, dispute resolution, and international cooperation in tax matters. We therefore support strengthening Article 12 in line with the African Group's proposal to ensure it delivers meaningful, long-term, and equitable capacity support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sierra Leone. Nigeria, please.
Thanks, colleagues, and good afternoon to everyone. I do not intend to speak for too long because it appears there is a good convergence around capacity building and technical assistance, and that is a good one because it is actually desirable for effective implementation of the convention and also the improvement in tax arena generally. We cannot therefore overemphasize the importance of capacity building and technical assistance, but it must be tailored to meet the varying needs of all jurisdictions that may require it, because at any point in time, not only developing countries may require assistance, other jurisdictions may also be in need or in want of it at one point or the other. So the capacity building and technical assistance must therefore be targeted, it must be result-driven, and the impact must be measurable, so that at the end of it, we could measure and say, this is indeed what we set out to achieve, and we have achieved it. We agree with the comment raised by many delegates regarding paragraph 1. We do not see it as relevant to Article 12, but we take solace in the speech that Zambia has presented on behalf of the African group, because that is a suggested draft to replace the entire article. So Nigeria aligns with the statement made by African group and others who have spoken in support of that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nigeria. Singapore, please.
Thank you, Co-Lead, for the opportunity to speak. Singapore recognizes that capacity building is an important enabler for states to mobilize resources for domestic development and international tax cooperation. Singapore has been actively providing assistance in this respect, and we will continue to do so. Just two comments on this article. On paragraph 1, we share the views echoed by Norway, China, Germany, Saudi Arabia, and others, that this may be more appropriately placed in another article on obligations or perhaps in the preamble. On paragraph 3, we note that capacity building is fundamentally a demand-based technical assistance. So we may not want to be so overly prescriptive in the areas of assistance and vision, as Article 3B and 3C does, to allow flexibility to cater for future developments such as the emergence of new technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Singapore. United Kingdom, please.
Thank you very much. I'll keep this intervention brief, as I think many partners have already said this. I mean, look, the UK supported the inclusion of a specific capacity building article and would again affirm our support today. It's been our experience that developing countries have been clear that they want scaled up, demand-driven support to help strengthen tax and public finance systems. And to that end, the UK has expanded its peer-to-peer offer and continues to support multilaterals with their work in this area. And then in particular on the text, I guess as is represented at the moment, we consider that it's important to, just as a minimum for the Framework Convention, have a commitment from all parties to offer technical assistance and capacity building to other jurisdictions based on their resources and expertise. And so we would urge that this language continue to remain a part of the Framework Convention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, United Kingdom. Republic of Korea, please.
Thank you, Mr. Kohli, for giving me the floor. Korea fully recognizes the importance of capacity building and technical assistance as an essential component of effective and inclusive international tax cooperation. In particular, Korea acknowledges the need to support developing countries in strengthening their domestic tax systems and administrative capabilities. In detail, with regard to paragraph 1, Korea aligns with the views expressed by Germany, India, and Norway, and other delegations. We note that the current text appears to be broad in scope and general in nature. In our view, such language resembles a general implementation clause that would normally apply to the Framework Convention as a whole, rather than being placed specifically within one article. Secondly, Korea is of a view that the content of modalities of the support described in this article should be designed with sufficient flexibility, taking into account the different circumstances and needs of each country. Korea notes that the current draft appears to be too detailed and prescriptive in this regard. In our view, Overly detailed and provisions may constrain the ability to tailor support to the actual need of beneficiary countries and could risk undermining the overall effectiveness of capacity building efforts. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Korea. Do we have any more member states? Okay, Jamaica, please.
Thank you, co-lead. Co-lead, similar to many who have spoken before, we support the importance of having Article 12 in the Framework Convention, particularly, coming from a developing country and a small island developing country. However, like others have said before us, paragraph 1 we think is misplaced and ought to be elsewhere in the convention as an enabling section, a general statement of commitment. And we believe that the first paragraph under this heading should be a paragraph that seeks to mention how the capacity building needs of countries will be ascertained. And so we think that is where the article ought to start, ascertaining the capacity building needs of countries. Paragraph 2 we think is a bit limited in that from our interpretation it seeks to mention building the capacity in respect of participating in the norm-setting process, debates, etc. We believe that the needs of the capacity needs are wider than that. We believe that any capacity building and technical assistance that is offered should ultimately ought to be building capacity so that the revenue authorities can be optimized in terms of how they carry out their duties. And because that is where the need is in terms of data mining and auditing skills, etc. So we believe that paragraph 2 should be rescoped. In terms of paragraph 3, we are also of the view that it should be rescoped because it seems to focus on capacity building in only certain areas and would, in our view, run counter to what the article is seeking to achieve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jamaica. Lesotho, please.
Thank you, Chair. We are aligned to the submission made on behalf of the African group by Zambia, but I just wanted to address one aspect, and that is paragraph 1. To us, paragraph 1 still looks properly placed. Elsewhere in the convention, you have made undertakings to do certain things. For example, let's say we are going to share information in relation to real estate, and we find that for us to be able to undertake that, we'll need to do legislative changes, including administrative aspects. So it could be that that registry sits elsewhere, but for purposes of effectively delivering on that, we might want to change the institution where it sits. And then paragraph 1 would therefore allow the particular country to actually make sure that whatever commitments that it has made with regards to certain article of the convention be able to be undertaken. But I think that is the essence of what paragraph 1 is all about. In other words, capacity building is not about the soft skills that we are looking at. It's also about making sure that there are procedural arrangements that are proper or properly established. And as a result, if we have that, then we'll be able to meet our obligations under the convention. So that would be our thinking on that particular one. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Lesotho. Indonesia, please.
Thank you, colleague. We support the inclusion of capacity building and technical assistance article in the Framework Convention, which call for provisions on institutional mechanism to support member states in building capacity in relevant international tax practices and related issues. Such mechanisms are essential to enable effective participation in international tax cooperation and the implementation of the Framework Convention. We encourage capacity building and technical assistance to be sustainable, flexible, and responsive to country-specific needs. And in this regard, we emphasize that such assistance should be long-term in nature in order to maximize its effectiveness and deliver lasting impacts for countries in need. We also view that capacity building and technical assistance should cover a broad scope, which I believe that African Group also mentioned this, so we can support the suggestion made by African Group and ready to working constructively on this article. Thank you.
Thank you. Brazil, please.
Thank you, Mr. Khalid. Brazil recognizes the importance of capacity building and technical assistance as a structural element of the convention and as essential to its effectiveness, legitimacy, and long-term sustainability. We share the view presented by other delegations that paragraph 1 and 2 would be more appropriate placed in other part of the convention. And we also know that constructive elements in the proposals put forward by the African Group and China, which we would be willing to take into consideration as appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Khalid.
Thank you, Brazil. Okay, I think Jamaica again.
Thank you for giving me the floor again, co-lead. Just to mention that we also support the interventions on finding a way to measure the impact of capacity building. We believe that that is critical. It has eluded, I think, tax authorities for some time now, how you measure the productivity that comes from capacity building. So just to lend our support to that intervention.
Thank you, Jamaica. Japan, please.
Thank you, colleague, for giving me the floor. We agree with many countries that capacity building is fundamental and important. We just wanted to make one point that we understand that various organizations are currently implementing diverse capacity building work, and it is necessary to avoid overlaps and implement them efficiently and effectively. To that end, we believe the coordination with other international and regional organizations providing capacity building support is crucial. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. Ghana, please.
Thank you, Chair. Ghana supports the African Group's proposed text, particularly the emphasis on strengthening developing countries' ability to participate in international cooperation. Ghana welcomes provisions for sharing best practices and technical assistance, such as addressing creative accounting practices that erode the tax base. Ghana suggests ensuring these measures are complemented by robust framework for data analytics and UOI, as mentioned by the African Group. This will enhance our capacity to implement the convention effectively. Chair, I respectfully submit.
Thank you, Ghana. Egypt, please.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. في البداية نؤكد على أهمية إدراك مادة تتعلق ببناء القدرات والمساعدة الفنية بالاتفاقية الإطارية لدعم دول الأطراف بصفة عامة والدول النامية بصفة خاصة في بناء القدرات فيما يتعلق بالممارسات الضريبية الدولية والمسائل المتعلقة بها لضمان تمتعها بالقدرات اللازمة للمشاركة بفاعلية في التعاون الدولي في المسائل الضريبية ولتنفيذ الاتفاقية الإطارية ذاتها. وفيما يتعلق بالفقرة 1 نؤكد على أن هذه الفقرة لم تضف شيئا جوهريا، حيث أن كل دولة ستقوم بالتأكيد باتخاذ الإجراءات القانونية والإدارية الضرورية لتطبيق التزاماتها بموجب الاتفاقية الإطارية، وبالتالي لا يجب أن ندرج هذه الفقرة في هذه المادة. كما نعبر عن خالص الشكر على صياغة الفقرات الرابعة والخامسة من المادة 11، ونبدأ ترحابنا بهذه الفقرات. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Okay, thank you, Egypt. I don't see any more. Member states, so we'll move to stakeholders and CYI, please.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates and colleagues, I have the honor to speak on behalf of Children Youth International and Major Group for Children and Youth. We strongly welcome Article 12 as a central pillar of an effective, inclusive, and implementable framework convention. The capacity of states to fulfill their obligations under this convention depends not only on political commitment, but also on sustained capacity-building efforts, technical assistance, and access to the institutional, financial, and technological resources necessary for meaningful and equitable participation in international tax cooperation. From the perspective of children and youth, capacity building is closely linked to equity, intergenerational justice, and the absence of adequate and sustained support. Many countries, particularly those in fragile and capacity-constrained contexts, face challenges in fully engaging in norm setting, agenda setting, and decision-making processes, as well as in implementing measures to address illicit financial flows, tax avoidance, and tax evasion. These capacity gaps risk perpetuating unequal outcomes and constraining governments' ability to mobilize domestic resources for education, health, social protection, and climate action. We therefore welcome the emphasis in Article 12 on procedures that recognize the diverse needs, priorities, and capacities of all countries. Meaningful participation should extend beyond formal inclusion to ensure that states are able to contribute substantively, whether directly or through country groupings, in accordance with their preferences. In this regard, technical assistance should be demand-driven, predictable, and well-coordinated with relevant international and regional organizations. Finally, we emphasize that capacity-building efforts should be transparent and inclusive and complemented by meaningful engagement with civil society, including youth-led organizations, which can contribute to knowledge sharing, monitoring, and accountability. In closing, we encourage member states to approach Article 12 not as a peripheral provision, but as a foundational enabler of the Convention's objectives, ensuring that international tax cooperation is truly universal, effective, and capable of delivering sustainable development outcomes for present and future generations. We thank you.
Thank you. We now have stakeholder one, that's CIATINI, South and Eastern African Trade Information and Negotiation Institute.
Thank you, Chair. Aloysius Chitengo, and I work for Southern and Eastern Africa Trade Information and Negotiation Institute, speaking on behalf of the African Civil Society Working Group on the UN Tax Convention. On the onset, it should be clear that no amount of capacity building can do away with the structural and systemic issues that exist in the current tax system. Capacity building is not a panacea to the challenges faced by developing countries in the international tax cooperation. The reality is that international tax standards must be revised. This means that holistically, the Framework Convention should be drafted for international. This means that holistically, the Framework Convention should ensure that the drafting of the international standards, legal and regulatory frameworks be inclusive and participatory, considering the different capacities, particularly of the global southern countries. That said, to fully address the tax-related illicit financial flows, tax abuse, tax avoidance, it is necessary for all countries to have a sound technological base. For this reason, we propose including an obligation to transfer the requisite technology required for the implementation of the commitments under the Framework Convention. The lack and inadequacy of technology has previously exacerbated inequality and increased technological divides and technological capacity difference between the developed and developing countries. Additionally, the notion of technology transfer is common in public international law, and therefore, this would not be the first time that such an obligation would appear in the UN instrument. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We now have stakeholder 2, the CNCD.
Thank you very much, co-lead. Distinguished delegates, I'm speaking on behalf of CNCD 1111 and the Global Alliance for Tax Justice. And if you'll allow me, I will be short, to the point, and if I may say so, high level, as I understand this is appreciated by some in this room. So on Article 12, regarding capacity building, we have one major concern. You cannot build capacity into a broken tax system. Transfer pricing and the broader international system simply do not work. Countries in both the global north and south are losing several hundreds of billions of dollars due to international tax abuse every year. All the capacity building in the world will not change that. Even parties who usually offer capacity building are losing themselves from this broken system. Global North countries have by far the most powerful tax administrations in the world, yet still they are unable to tax profits from multinational corporations and the wealthiest individuals in a fair and effective manner. And for the vast majority of them, we wonder why they have not been more ambitious here, as they would have a lot to gain from a new, more effective international tax system. So the core problem lies not in capacity building, but elsewhere. And this brings us to the main point civil society organizations have been making this whole week. This framework convention cannot be hollow. It must include strong commitments, mechanisms, and mandates that allow the conference of the parties to flesh out and operationalize the articles of the convention, and thus establish a new, fair, transparent, and effective international tax system for sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now have stakeholder 3, APMDD.
Thank you, Chair, co-lead, and friends. I bring you greetings of peace and solidarity from Southeast Asia. I represent the APMDD. And just for your information, my name is Charles Santiago. I'm a 3-term member of Parliament from Malaysia, as well as the co-chair of the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights. Distinguished delegates, colleagues, and friends, before we turn to legal tax, look around this room. What we see is the distribution of power. Some delegations arrive with teams of lawyers, tax experts, and seasoned negotiators. Others are absent, not because they lack knowledge or commitment, but because they lack the resources simply to be here. Those empty chairs matter. They are not accidental. They reflect a system that privileges power and excludes those without it. And we know the consequences of this. If you are not at the table, you are on the menu. This is why Article 12 is not a technical provision, it is a political one. At its core, Article 12 asks us who gets to participate meaningfully in shaping global tax rules. For decades, the global tax system has worked well for wealthy states and multinational corporations. Capital moves freely, profits are protected, while many countries face eroding tax bases, underfunded public services, and widening inequality. This is not accidental. These rules were written in spaces where many countries were never fully present. Today, global tax norms remain dominated by the OECD and powerful economies. Much of the Global South is expected to implement frameworks it had little role in designing. Agenda setting is concentrated and policy space is constrained. Therefore, Article 12 exists because this imbalance cannot be solved by compliance alone, but capacity building must be understood correctly. It is not charity. It is not top-down assistance, and it is definitely not a substitute for inclusion. Capacity building must enable countries to participate fully, meaningfully, independently by resourcing attendance, expertise, analysis, and confident negotiations. This is a matter of reparative justice, as the Global South is still treated as a recipient of expertise, not a co-author of solutions. In Article 12, if Article 12 is serious, it must break from this model through a UN-administered, independently governed, and demand-driven funding mechanism that builds long-term capacity. Capacity building cannot be an add-on. It must be the foundation of this convention. Level the playing field and fairness becomes possible. Fail to do so, and equality will simply be rewritten into new rules. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you. We now have stakeholder 5, the UN independent expert on the promotion of a democratic and equitable international order.
Thank you, Chair. We are following the works of the conference with my colleague, the independent expert on sovereign debt, Professor Waris, and we both consider it of historic importance. It is indeed a pivotal moment. For decades, international tax rules have been written in Paris by a club of rich countries. This framework, the existing international tax framework, is not broken. It is working exactly as designed, to prioritize the profits of multinationals, capital exporting countries, over fairness and development needs. The evidence is stark. 7 years after the OECD BEPS reforms, US multinationals sift twice as much profit out of developing countries as before the reforms. Only 5 developing nations can access country-by-country reports. $1 trillion annually flows out of the Global South, while hospitals go unbilled and teachers go unpaid. This is not just an economic failure, it is a serious human rights violation. The new OECD side-by-side package won't remedy the situation. On the contrary, if implemented, it is going to have serious impact, both on the North-South divide and also the democratic character of the international order. A democratic and equitable international order cannot be built on arrangements negotiated in restricted settings and subsequently presented as global solutions. The United Nations Framework Convention is, on the contrary, transparent and grounded in the principle of one country, one vote, reflecting the equal dignity and participation of all states. It represents a critical opportunity to chart a different course towards an inclusive and effective international tax cooperation, rooted in genuine multilateralism and sovereign equality. This is truly a historic moment. Let's not waste it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. We'll have the Republic of Tanzania, please.
Thank you, colleague. We align with the statement made by Zambia on behalf of the African Group and the others in support of this proposal. A convention that creates obligations without implementable support risks establishing unequal participation in the outcomes. Capacity building must therefore be actionable, measurable, and responsive to the needs of developing countries and countries in special situations. We emphasize the technology transfer and the operational support, including digital tax systems, data analytics, and secure infrastructure, supported by financing and assistance to deploy solutions. We also support the skills and expertise transfer through secondments, exchange programs, and the structured training to build the sustainable institutional capacity. In conclusion, co-lead, capacity building is vital for international tax cooperation on an equal footing. Without it, fair and equitable domestic resource mobilization will remain out of reach and the development gap will persist. We therefore support the African Group proposal with the clear commitments and practical modalities for technical assistance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tanzania. We now have stakeholder 4, the UN Independent Expert on Foreign Debt and International Financial Obligations.
I had a similar challenge with trying to understand what the purpose of the first paragraph was, but I will give you solutions because of the conversations that we were all party to in Nairobi. So the challenge in capacity building, I think, is being seen from the perspective of a specific set of countries that need training and a specific set that are available to give support. And there are two elements to this treaty when it comes to capacity building and assistance. The first is capacity building for all member states across the world to implement this treaty at the end of it. And this was a conversation that we did have in Nairobi. And then the second part of capacity building and technical assistance is now for those that have less capacity or technical support that need to even get into the space. And I'm, of course, cognizant of the fact of the empty spaces which we've been referring to. So the challenge is therefore threefold. And the solution will therefore also be threefold. You will have north-south issues, south-south issues, and south-north issues. But at a certain point in time, the learnings and the capacity building under this treaty and its obligations, as you then come to a conclusion to it, are going to be things you have to mainstream across all governments and all ministries across the world working on these particular tax issues. So I see issues of learning, unlearning, and relearning in that process. So what does capacity building then and technical assistance involve in these particular paragraphs that we are talking about? One is this shared building, and the second is the building on tax technical issues. So I would like to posit an amendment to paragraph 1 and say that perhaps it will add clarity if we say that each state party shall take the necessary measures, including legislative and administration, to ensure that all capacity building and technical assistance is in line with these obligations. And I think that if you put that in, perhaps it will add some clarity into the space without the need to completely remove it, as some member states are suggesting. I thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. Can we have MYAD, please?
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates and colleagues, I am speaking on behalf of the McGill Youth Advisory Delegation. With reference to paragraph 1 of the Article 12, we align with various member states that it lacks specificity. We know that the Convention does not specify what constitutes the necessary measures required to the implementation, nor how capacity building efforts should be designed over time. We would like to add a youth perspective to capacity building, as we believe that it should not only apply to support the ministries or tax authorities of state parties, but also to investing in youth, young professionals, students, and early career experts. As stated on the terms of reference, this convention aims to, quote, respond to existing and future tax and tax-related challenges. Achieving this objective requires ensuring that future generations are equipped with the knowledge, skills, and opportunities to meaningfully contribute to its implementation. Youth organizations are already engaged in these processes, and we stand ready to support state parties in building a convention that is effective, inclusive, and sustainable over the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, MYAD. Okay. India, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small clarification on this article. Would we be having a protocol on this particular article also? I mean, or is it like for every article we would be having a protocol so that we understand how deep or how vast we have to go into the contents of the article?
All right, thank you, India, and Elise. I'm just consulting to make sure. But we don't expect to have a protocol on capacity building. It will be more of the article basically will speak for itself. And if there's anything, it's the state parties or the conference of parties which would sort of coordinate any such activities. But there won't be any protocol. Okay, I don't see any more requests for the floor. And so it seems everybody's in a hurry to enjoy the rest of the day. So we'll do our best not to keep you any longer. But before then, I want to say thank you to everybody for the lively discussions we've had this week. I believe that when we go into the intersessional sessions, we'll have a lot more lively ones. There was a question asked that we seem to have spent so much time on the commitments, and when are we moving to other articles? We are moving to other articles, but the time we spent on the commitments was because the commitments basically form the foundation for quite a number of things that we are going to do. And for those who have an idea of how buildings are put up, depending on the number of stories you have in the building, it determines the foundation. So if it's just a simple one-story building, what goes into the foundation is not the same as what goes into a 100-floor building. The foundation is different. Sometimes the foundation is left to sit for several months, sometimes even a year, for it to settle before the building actually goes up. I believe that this process, the convention we are looking at, is not something which is not just for today, it's not just for tomorrow. We've talked about it going into the future. So it is important that we take our time over the commitments and ensure that, as has been mentioned several times, we all understand what we want to do. And in that, as we build on the other articles, we're able to do that. And we're also able to provide a foundation for the Conference of Parties to be able to actually carry out their role as we go forward. So I'm happy that we've all been involved in this process of building this foundation. Okay. Germany doesn't want me to finish, but Michael, because he's not close enough for me to nudge him in the race, so he's doing this to me. Germany, please.
Thank you, Mr. Coley, with your indulgence. We are not going to discuss Article 21. I'm asking because, after all, we have a draft of Article 21 in front of us.
No, please. I think everybody wants to have an early Friday, so we decided to give everybody an early Friday. No. We've not discussed in the workstream yet. So anyway, so Article 21 has always been there. We've never really discussed in the workstream, and I don't want to burst anybody's bubble now by bringing in Article 21 after we said that we've closed. So we'll look at that. So I'm sure we'll look at it later on during the work stream.
Who owns it here, or is the relation between protocol and so it's just different from the. We will discuss it, but it's not.
All right, so Germany, thank you for that reminder. But as I mentioned, we'll look at it later. Okay, so yes, so it's good that we finish up. We'll have quite a number of articles we'll look at during the intersessional session in preparation for the August plenary. So I believe that just as we've participated all along, we will continue to contribute as we look at these new articles. There are some of them that we've started looking at already. We've asked that members should think through them. We brought an outline for Conference of Parties. We brought an outline for Secretariat. We looked at data collection. We have some indicative definitions. And I was wondering whether we need a definition for what we've all been saying, that we need to have a high level, because it seems the high level seems to differ based on this. So I don't know whether we might need a definition on what high level is. Anyway, that's by the way. I don't think anybody wants to do that. But then, so let's continue to support as we do the work. We will, we are planning to have a focus group on some of the articles to see the ones which are a bit naughty, to see how we can advance them and make sure that at the end of the day, we're all on the same page and we work assiduously and fast enough to make sure that we're able to complete our work on schedule. So with that, I want to say thank you to everybody for your cooperation during this past week. You've been great, and we will continue to have discussions. I'll hand over to the chair.
Thanks to Daniel, and thanks for everyone for your constructive interventions through this week. And regarding focus group, I would like to make an announcement. So on the work stream 1, we will be establishing a focused group tasked with developing a balanced and constructive proposal for Article 5. One of the key areas with divergence still remains. Each regional group is invited to nominate 3 member states to participate in this effort. The focus group will begin its work immediately and is expected to conclude by mid of April at the latest. Throughout its mandate, the group will report directly to the co-lead and to the chair with full support provided by the Secretariat. The group will also elect a leader from among its members. This role may rotate at the start of each meeting to ensure inclusivity and shared ownership of the process. I trust that this structure will allow us to advance efficiently and collaboratively toward a text that reflects balance, fairness, and the collective priorities for all regions. I would request different regional groups to send their nomination maximum by Tuesday, cut-off business day, to the Secretariat on the committee email. So I hope this was clear about the focus group that will be working on Article 5. Upon finalizing their work, the proposal will go to the work stream to be discussed. Then after that, of course, the normal process after work stream, it will come to the committee as a part of the text that will be discussed in August. So again, I will remind you with a deadline that please, each regional group need to send 3 nominees among their members. So this should be sent by email to the Secretariat no later than cut-off business day, Tuesday. Thank you all, and final reminder, next Monday we will convene in conference room 1 in the, like, I don't know, it's ground floor or first floor, I don't know. Basement, on the basement. Sub 1, okay. So the room that we used to convene in. Thank you all, and wish you a good evening and a happy weekend. Take care. Thank you.